Today's case is not just about a woman who vanished in the Bahamas. It is about new court files that are now forcing people to look at Brian Hooker's past in a completely different way. Before Lynette Hooker disappeared at sea, before the sailboat Soulmate was seized, before the questions about the dinghy, the GPS data, and the search timeline, there was another woman from Brian Hooker's past who allegedly went to court with a warning. According to reported court documents, Brian Hooker's former wife claimed she feared him, feared his temper, and feared something that could look like an accident. That one word now feels chilling, because years later, Lynette Hooker vanished in what Brian Hooker described as an accident on the water. To be clear, Brian Hooker has not been charged with killing Lynette Hooker, and he has denied wrongdoing. But these newly surfaced files are raising serious questions. Was Lynette Hooker's disappearance a tragic boating accident? Or was the past already showing warning signs nobody should have ignored? The story begins with Lynette Hooker, a woman who was supposed to be living a peaceful sailing life with her husband, Brian Hooker. They were traveling on their sailboat, Soulmate, through the beautiful waters of the Bahamas. From the outside, it looked like a dream. A couple on the ocean, away from normal life, enjoying freedom and adventure. But behind that picture, this case has become one of the most disturbing missing person mysteries people are following right now. According to Brian Hooker's version, Lynette Hooker was with him in a small dinghy when she somehow fell or bounced into the water and disappeared. He claimed it was an accident. He claimed he could not find her. And because the ocean is so wide, so deep, and so difficult to search, Lynette Hooker has still not been found. But almost immediately, people close to Lynette Hooker began questioning that story. The reason is simple. Too many details did not feel clear. The timing, the location, the search, the boat, the GPS questions, and Brian Hooker's own actions after the disappearance all became part of the mystery. And now, the new court files connected to Brian Hooker's past have made the case even darker. These files reportedly come from Brian Hooker's earlier marriage. His former wife, Elizabeth, allegedly filed for protection years before Lynette Hooker vanished. In those court records, Elizabeth allegedly described a marriage filled with fear, anger, and disturbing behavior. She claimed Brian Hooker had a violent temper. She claimed there had been verbal, emotional, and physical abuse. She claimed he harassed her, showed up at her workplace, checked her schedule, and made her feel unsafe. But the most disturbing part is the alleged threat. According to reporting discussed in the source material, Elizabeth claimed that Brian Hooker warned her there could be an accident. She allegedly wrote that she had many reasons to take that threat seriously. And now, years later, after Lynette Hooker disappears in what Brian Hooker calls an accident, that old word is suddenly impossible to ignore. This is why the case has taken such a serious turn. These court files do not automatically prove what happened to Lynette Hooker. They do not replace evidence. They do not mean Brian Hooker is guilty in the eyes of the law. But they do create a disturbing pattern of questions. If a former wife once feared an accident, and a current wife later vanishes in an alleged accident, investigators and the public are naturally going to ask whether this was just coincidence or something much darker. Then there's Carly, Lynette Hooker's daughter. Carly has been one of the strongest and most emotional voices in this case. For her, this is not just a news story. This is her mother. This is her family. This is her nightmare. Carly has said she did not believe Brian Hooker's story from the beginning. According to Carly, her mother had previously told her troubling things about Brian Hooker. Carly claimed that Lynette Hooker said Brian Hooker had choked her and threatened to throw her overboard. That detail is extremely important because it connects directly to the way Lynette Hooker later disappeared. Again, these are allegations, and it is important to say that Brian Hooker has not been convicted of anything. But from Carly's point of view, this was not a normal accident story. This was something she says her mother had feared before. Imagine being Carly and hearing that your mother vanished from the water after allegedly warning you about being thrown overboard. Imagine then finding out that another woman from Brian Hooker's past had once allegedly warned a court about an accident. That is why Carly's suspicion feels so emotional and so powerful. She is not just reacting to one strange detail. She is reacting to a chain of details that all seem to point in the same troubling direction. The boat, Soulmate, is another major part of this mystery. In a case like this, the boat becomes extremely important because the ocean itself does not hold evidence the way a house, a room, or a street might. The water can erase things. The water can move things. The water can hide the truth. So investigators need to focus on what they can still examine. the boat, the systems, the records, and the possible digital trail. According to the case discussion, Soulmate was seized and searched. Investigators were reportedly looking at possible GPS data, boat systems, and whether Brian Hooker's story matched the available information. This matters because if someone says an incident happened in one location, but the data suggests something else, that becomes a major question. If the navigation system was off, investigators need to know why. Was it a normal technical issue? Was it panic and confusion? Or was something intentionally hidden? That is where the case becomes even more suspenseful. Because Brian Hooker's version depends heavily on the idea that Lynette Hooker simply fell into the water and could not be saved. But if the location, timeline, or boat data does not line up, then the story becomes harder for people to accept without more explanation. Another detail that raised questions is what happened after Brian Hooker was released from custody in the Bahamas. He had reportedly said he wanted to stay and search for Lynette Hooker. But according to the discussion in the script, after he was released, he left the Bahamas and returned to the United States. Some people may say he left because he was scared, stressed, or felt targeted. That is possible, but others see it differently. They ask, if Lynette Hooker was missing and Brian Hooker truly wanted to find her, why did he leave so quickly? Why did he not stay visible? Why did he not keep begging people to search? This does not prove anything by itself. But in a missing person case, behavior after the disappearance matters. Investigators often look at what someone does after a loved one vanishes. Do they search? Do they speak publicly? Do they cooperate? Do they avoid attention? Do they change their story? Do they leave? Every action becomes part of the bigger picture. This is why the expert discussion about no-body homicide cases matters. In cases where no body is found, prosecutors often have to rely on circumstantial evidence. That means they look at the relationship, the last known person with the victim, possible motive, inconsistencies, digital evidence, behavior after the disappearance, and prior warning signs. In this case, Brian Hooker was the last known person with Lynette Hooker. Brian Hooker gave the accident explanation. Brian Hooker was on the water with her. And now Brian Hooker's past court files are being discussed because they may help people understand whether there were earlier warning signs. The legal standard is still very important. Suspicion is not the same as proof. Public questions are not the same as a conviction. Brian Hooker remains innocent unless proven guilty in court. But the reason this case has gained so much attention is because the questions keep stacking up. First, Lynette Hooker disappears. Then, Carly says her mother had previously described threats. Then, the boat and GPS data raise questions. Then, Brian Hooker leaves the Bahamas after saying he would search. And now, old court files from Elizabeth allegedly described abuse, and an accident threat from years earlier. There's also the voice of Blaine Stevenson, a boating friend who spoke about a phone call with Brian Hooker after Lynette Hooker disappeared. Blaine Stevenson did not say he knew exactly what happened, but he said parts of the explanation did not make linear sense to him. He questioned details about life vests, flares, sunset timing, and the way the story was described. That matters because Blaine Stevenson understands boating life. If the explanation does not sound right to someone familiar with the water, that becomes another reason people want more answers. What makes this case so haunting is the way every part connects back to the same central question. Was Lynette Hooker lost in a sudden accident? Or did something happen to her before the ocean became the perfect place to hide the truth? The old court files do not answer that question completely, but they make the question much louder. They show that Brian Hooker's past was not as simple as some people may have believed. They show that another woman allegedly feared him long before Lynette Hooker vanished. And they show that the word accident may have been part of the story long before the Bahamas. For Lynette Hooker's family, especially Carly, this is about more than headlines. They want answers. They want closure. They want to know where Lynette Hooker is. They want to know whether her disappearance was truly a tragic accident or whether the warning signs were there all along. And until investigators reveal the full truth, this case will continue to grow darker with every new detail. Because now, the story is no longer just about a missing woman in the water. It is about new court files, an alleged accident warning, a seized sailboat named Soulmate, possible GPS questions, a daughter who says she never believed the story, and a husband whose past is now under a much brighter light. So the question remains, did Lynette Hooker vanish because of one tragic moment in the Bahamas, Or did Brian Hooker's old court files reveal a danger that was hiding in plain sight long before she disappeared?